In this video, I'm going to show you how to style and use tables with Bootstrap. So we're not going to be actually creating a table because that is a bit time consuming. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up blank.html and then we're going to look at our snippets. We're going to click on table and copy the code for a very basic table. And in blank.html, I'm going to paste the table to replace the default text. Now I'm going to save this as tables. Okay, so let me get set up, creating a new preview window and making all the text larger. Let me change this to column MD8. Okay, so here you have your basic table in Bootstrap, and how that works is that if you were to create a table manually, this is how your table will look like without any styling in Bootstrap. So to start with the basic styling of tables in Bootstrap, you add the class of table to it. Alright, now there are other classes that you can add as well. Table bordered, table condensed, table hover, table responsive, table striped, etc. So let's go through them one by one. Let's first use table bordered. Okay, so you need to apply the class table, which sets all the basic styling for the table, and table bordered is an additional class that adds only a specific style, which in this case is a border. So you can see that the table is fully there's a border on every single cell for this table. Now let's try another class, which is table striped. Okay, so I hope that you can see the difference here when you're watching this video, because the color differences may not be that obvious, but you can see that each alternate row in this table now has a very light gray color added to it. Okay, and that's what happens when you choose table stripe. Every alternate row, and that is happens automatically. You don't need to go to each row to assign any class to it. Okay, now let's look at another class, which is table hover. Okay, now for this class, you may not notice any differences, but you would when you start to hover on any of the row. So just like table striped, except in this instance, the light gray color is applied on the row that you happen to hover on. Okay, now let's look at another class, which is table condense. So what this does is that it removes some of the padding in between the cells in your table to make it just a little bit more condensed. Let's see if you can spot the difference. So this is the table condense, and this is the regular table without any condense. Alright, so the differences are there, and you may want to use a condensed table in some situations. In most cases, just a basic table style would do. So you can apply multiple styles for table. Let me start by adding a border to it. So I'm going to apply table dash bordered. Now my table is bordered, but I can also add table striped. Okay, and I can also add table hover. Okay, so now my table is bordered, it's striped, every alternate row is striped, but there's also a hover element that you see here. When I hover on some of the alternate rows, you can actually see that the color changes automatically. Okay, and of course you can also apply table condense. Alright, so now this table is a basic table in Bootstrap. It is not responsive, and this is one of the biggest problems with tables. So if this is the actual table that you're going to use, there's simply after a certain screen size, for example, on a mobile phone, there's simply no way to save any space here. So what happens is that this table would break out of your page layout and ruin the responsive feel that is applied by default in Bootstrap. And there is no way to overcome this, but in Bootstrap 3 they have added another class which is table responsive. Now in order to show you table responsive, let me change the column here to just 4. Okay, so this looks like it has resized itself, but you only really know when I add a background color. So let me add a background color of a let me choose something really bright. Okay, aqua. That will do. Okay, so now you can see that the row or the column actually ends here, and the table spills out of that column. So this is what will happen on a mobile device, for example, where this is the maximum screen width and the table would spill out of your layout. So to make this table responsive in Bootstrap, let me collapse the entire table by clicking on full current block. So in Bootstrap, what you have to do is you have to apply a div and put this table inside that div, and let's call it div class table responsive. Okay, and let's close that div tag over here. Okay, so now the table is fully responsive. You can see the limits of the column MD4 is from this end to this end, and now with the responsive div, it fits perfectly in these in the small space that you see here. Some of the text appear to be missing. So this is how it works in Bootstrap for table responsive. You have to swipe if you are in a on your mobile phone. You have to swipe from left to right. So there's a scroll bar at the bottom, if you can see. Okay, so this is how Bootstrap makes the table responsive. Okay, and let's change that to column MD2 for an extreme example. Right, and now by default the user would only see these 2 columns here, and he can scroll, okay, from left to right to view the other information. This may not be the optimal way to do this, but tables are always a big issue with responsive layouts. Okay, tables are rigid, and I think this is one of the best ways to do it. Of course, in the other tutorials I will show you how to display different tables to your user depending on the screen size. So if they are on a desktop, you can show them this table, for example. Okay, but if they are on a mobile phone or on a tablet, you can actually create a separate table, and in that table you can reduce the number of columns, because basically the columns are what makes the table rigid and breaks out of your containing div element here. So in the other tutorials I'll show you how to create a separate table and show that table for mobile devices, and in that table you can actually maybe reduce the number of columns. You can test a few variations to find what you want. But anyway, this is the basic of using tables and styling tables in Bootstrap.